Welcome to another episode of Hanging Out for a Living. Today we have the pleasure of spending time with Bruce Wayne McLellan, a man who wears many hats, a personal leadership coach, author, musician, and a beacon of joy and wonder. Bruce has dedicated his life to rekindling the childlike sense of wonder in adults, reminiscent of the warmth Mr. Rogers brought to children. And if you don't know who Mr. Rogers is, you need to go Google him because you're missing out. With over 2 decades of guiding people through life's quintessential questions, Bruce's mission is to make the world a better place for our great grandchildren through personal leadership and boundless promise. So let's dive into his world and learn more about his journey. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today.
So honored to be here, Teresa. You have no idea. This is a wonderful program. I just love what you do.
Thank you. As I do what you do, it's the feeling is mutual, as they say. So, folks, you want to stick around till the end because we have a really special treat for you. But I don't want to give it away. So, let's start with our first question for Bruce. Bruce, you've spent really a considerable part of your life guiding people through personal leadership. Can you share with us a transformative experience or story from your coaching career that profoundly impacted you?
That's a great question because that's really what matters. Whenever we start a journey, we really don't know where it's taken us. And I didn't really know where it was taking me. What I knew was that I was here to make a better world for them, right? That's about what I knew. I didn't know what that meant and that sort of thing. And what I discovered was that we have a definition of success in our society that doesn't really work. And the research shows us that more than half of us worldwide believe that happiness, success comes from money and power. And most of us accept that and just kind of move on. Some of us intuitively know that there must be something more. So I started asking myself the question, geez, what if we could actually do the research and find out what really makes people happy? Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't I want to know? Yeah, actually, because if you're focusing on the right things, it makes a huge difference. If you're focusing on the wrong things, you're going down a very different road. True. Well, the good news is that research was done. And when I heard about it, it blew my mind. Some people have heard about this. It's a 75-year research program that was put on by Harvard for studying adult happiness. Now, they did this with blue-collar workers from Boston. They did this from people they followed folks through their college career into getting their first job, into retirement. 75 years is a lot of time. It's called a longitudinal study. What that means is it's really long, right?
That it is.
To find out. And it came out to be very, very clear, which is our relationship with the people closest to us determine our lifelong happiness and well-being. Now, some people have heard that before, but it's my job to ask the big questions. Really, so what does that mean? What does that mean to us? And this was already blowing my mind. I started thinking, wait a minute, I've been focusing on the wrong things. So what are we really trying to do here? So I started to ask myself, so I live in a society that believes that power and money is going to bring me happiness, and it doesn't. And in fact, our connections is what bring us happiness. What happens? And if you think about it, if I'm focusing on power and money over here, and what happens to my relationships with other people? It's not pretty.
No.
Think about people that climb the corporate ladder, people that come home and argue with their spouse because they must be right. In an information age, we believe power is in being right, having the best information. And if you look at that perspective, just from a global sense, where we have different politics, we have different religions, we have different cultures and all that sort of thing, we're different from each other. And we want people to think like us. That's not working.
No, most definitely not.
It's essentially about the idea that we want to improve our connections. So I started asking the question, all right, so if that's it, what is really success? And I have my own term for success because it's very different for everybody. And I call it a life worth living, that we want to create a life worth living. And that involves our connection with others and how we do that. So that was the biggest epiphany in terms of laying the groundwork for all of the work that I do. It just absolutely changed the work that I did over the last 2 decades.
That I love how you shared that, and so profound, really, as to what success truly is, and the relationships, incredibly important on how we not only build them but nurture them over time. And I've got to get my hands on that study, because that is really profound. 75 years. Wow. Talk about an investment in time to really bring that forth. Thank you for that. So, your approach to personal growth seems deeply rooted in mindfulness and a connection to the natural world, as evidenced by your experience on Mount Kilimanjaro. How do these elements influence your coaching philosophy and methods?
That's a great question. And I was really lucky to be introduced to meditation when I was 14. So I've been meditating for over 50 years, almost 60 now. And my own personal experience has been that I've noticed that I used to be a very arrogant, grouchy young man. It was really easy. I would really get angry at the drop of a hat, sort of thing. And what I realized through meditation is that somehow that persona disappeared. It went away. And I started thinking about that. I said, there must be research on it. Actually, there has been decades of research on meditation and mindfulness. And the whole idea is mindfulness really means paying attention in a non-judgmental way. So it's about paying attention. And a lot of people think that it's really about stopping the thoughts in your mind. It's not really about stopping the thoughts in your mind. It's really about paying attention to what's going on, both inside myself and in my world. And the benefits from that there's over 70 measurable benefits for that. I don't understand why my camera's jumping all over.
That's okay. That's all right. No worries.
And the most significant for me are that it actually improves my relationships with other people. Do you see a synchronicity between that and my epiphany? That
Yes, most definitely.
My relationships with other people. And why is that? Because I'm paying attention to what's going on inside of myself and what's going on in other people. Okay. And there's a word for that in our society and leadership and coaching called emotional intelligence. So mindfulness is a road into emotional intelligence, which actually helps greatly benefit our relationships with other people. I'll give you an example of that. Most of the time when we're having a conversation, we're making a judgment about, is this person right? Are they thinking the right things? Is this something that I'm interested in? Because if they're not right, and if they're not talking about something I'm interested in, I'm not going to pay attention. This flips that paradigm so that the idea that I listen to someone because I'm interested in them, not because I'm interested in their information.
That's a massive shift right there.
It is a huge shift. And we start thinking about that. We can have a conversation with anybody who has any belief, from any country, culture. It's pretty amazing, and it has transformed my life and the life of my clients and those who listen to my podcast, The One Kind Moment.
Absolutely. And if you're not listening to Bruce's podcast, you really need to do that. We'll have a link to that at in the description of this video. So Bruce, you talk about mindfulness, and you talk about the internal and of course the external. Do you feel that it's equally important to be like totally present? In today, we have so many distractions, right? People,
Mhm.
I'm sure we've both been to meetings where people have had their phones out, and it goes off and they glance over. So would you agree that there's also that part of being fully present?
Absolutely, no question. Especially in our world today, our world has become very complex. And part of the reason it's become complex is because of this little tiny thing here,
Yep,
right? And we're actually distracted from ourselves and from our world. So it's extremely important to understand that that's a wonderful tool, but
right.
it is not the focus of my life. And that's another piece of this, understanding that my relationship with my phone is not as important as my relationship with myself and other people. So that one guiding light from the Harvard study really changes a lot of ways of thinking in our society in terms of how we relate to people and how we relate to the machine, into the information technologies. Does that make sense to
Exactly.
you?
It does, and thank you for that. So you've balanced a successful career in corporate America with a lifetime of mindfulness practice.
Right.
You've been there, you've done that. What advice would you give to our listeners who are striving to find harmony between their professional ambitions and personal well-being? And I know you touched on that a little bit earlier. If there's anything else you'd like to add.
Well, I think it's really about priorities and focusing on the right thing. And that's largely what a life worth living is answering that question for myself. So it's a lot of self-awareness. I have an approach that I use called knowing, loving, and leading. So knowing is really about self-awareness, knowing myself better. What is important to me? Who are the people that are important to me, and how can I get better at that? Loving, how do I accept myself? Do I accept others? And the big one, the big component of all these is accepting life as it is. So it's not only just accepting ourselves, which is about self-love and connecting with others, but it's also accepting life as life is. And there's a lot of work for folks in that because life is uncertain. And I think understanding that life is uncertain and accepting it is really difficult. I actually call that phenomena the wild, audacious ride, WAR, the wild, audacious ride. So how do we deal with it? There's really only two strategies for dealing with uncertainty, which is actually, by the way, Teresa, humanity's deepest core fear, which is fear of uncertainty. All other fears arise from that, which is I don't know what's coming in the next moment of my life. I don't know
Right.
what's coming, depending on what relationships, job, health, whatever it is, we don't know what's coming. So understanding that is extremely important. And that's the leading part. So we've got the knowing, the loving, the leading part. So how do I do that? And there are basically two ways, and I'm going to oversimplify for this talk today, but there's really two ways of dealing with certainty. One is creating more certainty, okay, which is about planning, planning my project, organizing my office, scheduling things and that sort of thing. But there's a limit to that because I can schedule a meeting, as you and I know, scheduling
Yeah.
a meeting can be really tough because life has its own rules.
Happens.
And
Yeah.
life just happens. And when we fight that, we could be upset with each other. Well, how come you missed my meeting? I'm really sorry, but life intercedes. And of course, you understand that, but not a lot of people do. So that has a limitation. The other half of that equation is what I call psychological resilience, which is the ability to bounce back from challenging situations. And so some people are really good at organizing, and some people are really good at psychological resilience, okay? If you put those two together, I call that radiant resilience. You might want to jot that down. Radiant resilience, which is the combination of creating more certainty and accepting the fact that it's not going to be that way necessarily, and also developing the part of myself that has the ability to bounce back from challenging situations. You may be familiar with Viktor Frankl in his book
Yes.
called Man's Search for Meaning.
Yep.
That is about developing a sense of radiant resilience. If you read that book again from a different point of view, it's really, if you think about the concentration camps of World War II,
Yeah.
that is the ultimate, one of the most difficult situations for any human being to have to face in that piece. And there were people in that actually thrived in that situation. And that's what Frankl's book is essentially about, is how do you thrive in a challenging life? Now, if you look at the rest of us, the challenges we have compared to those people are nothing.
Exactly. No, it's all perspective, right?
It's
Too. So,
perspective, but there's also very specific tools. So one of the
yes.
things that I help people in the leading section is developing a better ability to create certainty, if you're not good at that, and also developing more resilience. And there's a ton of people in the world that have, besides Frankl, who have spent time doing that, including rock climbers, Marines, people that have been in very difficult situations and been able to bounce back.
I hope, folks, you've been taking some notes, because you're going to want to read that book. And I know that I've got it on my bookshelf over there, and I'm going to pull it back down and reread it. It's been a while.
Right. So I think just to tie it together for folks is the self-awareness part is, one of the easiest questions we can ask is, when dealing with uncertainty, what am I good at? Okay. And what am I not so good at? And really focusing on developing that part of both of them. So if you're really good at creating certainty, help other people learn that. Okay, that's what you're good at, and not everybody is.
Right, exactly.
But they're both learnable things. If you're really good at psychological resilience, bouncing back from challenging situations, which is one of my strengths, which is bouncing back from challenging situations, and so that's one of the things that I help people do, because I think having both of those as part of your life skill helps you to accept life on life's terms. And that's essentially what it's about. Excellent. And with all of those tools in mind, we can create a life worth living.
I love that. Thank you. And we'll dive into our last question here. Music is a significant part of your life, Bruce. How does your music influence your work as a personal leadership coach?
I've been trying to answer that question for most of my life. And it really came to me recently. I was doing some volunteer work with a group of alternative school students down here in Naples called the Walden Project. And as you may know, during COVID, a lot of people got on Zoom.
Yes.
So imagine me teaching personal leadership over Zoom to teenagers.
I can't even fathom, but go ahead.
Well, some of them were in their beds, and falling asleep, and some of them were looking on their phone. Some of them were doing that kind of stuff. I said to myself, I've got to do something different. So what I decided to do is really think about, how did the ancient people pass on their lessons from generation to generation as they huddled around their campfires or their hearths? And it was by two things: stories and music. So I started telling them stories and playing music for every single one of those things. And what I discovered was they would say, "Oh, it's time for Bruce Wayne again. This is our favorite part of the week." So they went from snoozing to just being very engaged.
Right.
So that is a bigger lesson for me, is how it all ties together. So telling stories, which is what I do when I perform, I tell stories, and it's also what I do as a leadership coach. I tell stories, and I also write music and play music that is relevant to the work that I do. And when I do perform in public, this is a big secret, so we're going to just lean in here.
Okay.
I play music that's quiet enough so that people can have a conversation with each other. I don't care if I get heard. They're going to hear me either consciously or unconsciously.
Certainly.
Actually, and I played a gig a couple of weeks ago, and this 30-something beautiful young woman and her husband were there. And she came over and she's apologizing. Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't listening. I was really talking to my husband, and we have kids and we have jobs. We both have jobs, and you know, our life is so full and so distracting. So we're just really just enjoy each other's company. But your music was so beautiful. And I said, please don't apologize, because that's what I do this for. I want people to connect. The music is there as the social connection, the social jelly, if you will, to kind of connect us together. And it kind of blew her mind thinking about that. So I think understanding the role of music, storytelling, mindfulness, and our connection with other people is really very significant.
Such a strong conduit, right? Music can be, and storytelling, absolutely. So, Bruce, it's been an absolute joy to have you with us today, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your insights. Your journey really reminds us of the endless possibilities within each of us and the importance of nurturing our inner joy and wonder. I encourage our listeners to continue this conversation with you. And you can find Bruce's contact information and learn more about his work in the episode description. So, once again, Bruce, thank you for being a friend to all and guiding light in our journey towards personal growth. And remember when I told you to stick around till the end because we have something very special for you? That's coming in right here. So let's close out and have Bruce play a few bars of his inspiring music as we say goodbye. So, Bruce, if you send us on our way, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
I would absolutely love that. One of the things that I did is I started playing music that is only really about love and connection. And James Taylor is one of my favorites. And he has a song which ties into almost everything that I do, called The Secret of Life.
Oh,
So let's take a little ride with that.
please.
The secret of life is enjoying the passage of time. Secret of life is enjoying the passage of time. Any fool can do it. There ain't nothing to it. Nobody knows how we got to the top of the hill. Since we're on our way down, we might as well enjoy the ride. The secret of love is an opening of your heart. It's okay to feel afraid, but don't let that get away. Everyone knows that love is the only road. Since we're only here for a while, might as well show some style. Give us a smile. Isn't it a lovely ride? I'll be sliding down, I'll be gliding down. Try not to try too hard, it's just a lovely ride. Isn't it a lovely ride? I'll be gliding down, I'll be sliding down. Try not to try to climb. It's just a clear. Secret of life is enjoying the passage of time. See you all around.
Thank you.